Hi everyone. Let's take a look at this cost allocation demonstration, and we'll work through problem 21-1A, which is an allocation of building occupancy cost to departments. Okay, Citibank has several departments that occupy both floors of a two-story building. The departmental accounting system has a single account, building occupancy cost, in its general ledger. The types and amounts of occupancy cost recorded in this account appear in the top section. So we have depreciation, interest, taxes, gas, some other items, and the total is $64,000. Now, the building has 4,000 square feet on each floor. In previous periods, the accounting manager divided the 64,000 occupancy cost by 8,000 square feet to find an average cost of $8 per square foot, and then charged each department a building occupancy cost equal to this rate times the number of square feet that each department occupied. Now, Laura Diaz manages a first floor department that occupies 1,000 square feet, and Lauren Wright manages a second floor department that occupies 1,800 square feet of floor space. Okay, now they're questioning whether the same rate per square foot for all departments is a proper approach to use. And they're questioning it because the first floor space is more valuable. So they check a recent real estate study of average local rental costs, and they find that the first floor space is worth $30 per square foot, and the second floor space is worth $20 per square foot. And that excludes cost of heating, lighting, and maintenance. So let's tackle part one first, which is the traditional way: allocate all occupancy costs to the Diaz and Wright departments using the current allocation method. Okay, now I'm going to flip to the second page to solve that. Okay, now you've seen that on your screen, and what we know from the problem is Diaz gets 1,000 square feet. Why don't I enter it with a comma, then the formatting stays. Okay, and Wright uses 1,800. We know the rate is $8 per square foot for both, right? So I'll copy that down. So the total is simply the multiplication of the square foot that's used times the rate. Okay? Widen this column a little bit. Shrink one over here so that the screen still appears about the same size. And that's the solution to part one. Okay, now let's look at the problem again and work through the second requirement. Allocate the depreciation, interest, and taxes occupancy cost to the Diaz and Wright departments in proportion to the relative market values of the floor space, and then allocate the heating, the lighting, and the maintenance cost to the departments in proportion to the square feet occupied. So in the second case, we're going to ignore floor space market values. Okay, let's jump to the second page and give that a shot. Okay, I've changed the columns a little bit since you last saw it on your screen. Let's work through part two a little bit. Alright, well, we have to consider depreciation, right? We have to consider interest. Now, as you can see, I'm just simply reading right down the items that we have to consider, going straight down, okay? We have taxes. This is on the building and land. Oh, and the interest cost was on the building mortgage, right? Gas, which is the heating expense. We have lighting expense. Let's put the word expense in there. And we have maintenance expense. Okay, now we need to calculate the total cost. Let me make this one a little bit bigger, and so that'll stay on the screen. I'll shrink some of these columns here that we don't need. Okay, the total cost of depreciation was $18,000. Interest was $27,000. Taxes, $8,000. Gas and heating, $2,500. Lighting expense, $3,000. And maintenance expense, $5,500. And you'll see that I'm pulling that directly from the numbers that were given in the problem right up here, just to the left of my mouse. Okay, then some of these need to be allocated on a value-based approach, and those include the depreciation costs, the interest cost, and the taxes. But gas, lighting, and maintenance will be based on a usage approach. So I'll copy those there. Okay. Let's total the costs. I think the sum fund should work just fine. You see how I did that in one shot. Okay, so if we draw an equivalent of an underline here, we've got a total cost that we can consider here. Why don't I just do this one so we can see that, and then delete these cells. We don't need that. Okay, so we've got $64,000, which $53,000 will be allocated on a value approach and $11,000 on a usage. Let's make sure we've accounted for all the dollars. Certainly there's $64,000, so we've done it correctly. Okay, that takes care of determining a schedule of how much costs need to be allocated by which approach. Now let's compute the value-based approach. Okay, so we now need to allocate it by floor, right? So we have the first floor, we have the second floor, we have the total market value to consider. Okay, so let's drop in the information we need. We need to drop in the square footage. Then we need to determine what was the value per square foot, and I think that was given in the problem. Okay, is the first floor, what is it? Both are 4,000 square feet, I believe. 4,000 on each floor, yep. And the value per square foot was given in the problem at $30 for the first floor and $20 for the second. So now we know that there's 4,000 to go here, 4,000 to go here. The first floor value per square foot was $30. Whoop, type the right number, Ed. Okay, and the value per square foot on the second floor goes here. Okay, so then what we have to do is to determine a total. We'll underline these. Maybe I'll right justify those. They might look a little better, except this one should be left justified. And now we're going to multiply the square footage times the value per square foot. Okay. This one really doesn't need a dollar sign in front of it, nor does that, for proper formatting. And then we would sum above to come up with a 200,000 total market value. Now, once we have that, we need to allocate that 53,000 approach, the value approach, based on market value. Really, it's percent of the market value. Okay, so what would we do here? Let's copy this down again. Let me drop in an extra row here. Again, this would be floor. Now we could drop in the market values that we used from above, right? So if we break the market values down, that would be that cell, that would be that cell. We would need a total. Summing again. What's the percent of total? You can drop that right here, and that's going to be equal that cell divided by the absolute value of that cell. Turn those into percentages. Actually, we could copy this down as well. You'll see all of that will work out relatively nicely. So then let's determine the allocated cost. Why don't I again justify these, underline these cells, and we would multiply the allocated cost. The allocated cost, of course, would be the full 200,000 times the 60%. Why don't we allocate? Now let's determine the allocated cost, and we would take the relative So now we determine the allocated cost, and we are going to allocate the 53,000 of value-based cost times the appropriate percentage gives us 31.8. And then the second floor, we would take that 53,000 times that percentage as well. Now actually what I could have done in this cell here is locked in the F16 with the F4 key, making it an absolute value, and then I can copy from down below. Okay, and if we've done this one correctly, when I hit the sum key, we should equal the 53,000, and sure enough that cell equals that cell. So we've now taken care of allocating the 53,000 of value-based cost to the appropriate departments. Okay, once we have that, we can determine what that cost per square foot is. And that would simply be the allocated cost divided by the square footage, which is $4,000. Copying that from below, it will reference the correct cells. We have 530 for the second floor. Alright, why don't we slide up now and do the usage-based costs. Oh, and to be consistent, why don't I type it the exact same way. Okay, I'm going to start by copying this just to get the totals and everything where it needs to be. Okay, now with usage-based cost, we need a cell up here to be completed. I need to sum this just to determine the total square footage. Obviously, we know it's 8,000 from the problem, but I like it when it's visible in front of us in Excel. Now, the usage-based cost approach says, let's take the total amount of the usage-based cost, which is that 11,000 we computed previously, and let's divide it by the total square footage. The idea is we're not separating a value approach and determining how we're going to allocate gas, lighting, and maintenance. We're simply going to base it on square footage. Okay? So a usage-based cost approach gets us approximately $1.38, and that is a cost per square foot. Let's put that in there. Okay? That's what we need to do the usage-based cost allocation rate. Now, moving down, we then need to compute the total allocation rates for the floors. Okay, so instead of this being square footage, this would need to be value, this would need to be usage, and we could compute the total. Okay, let's now complete the numbers, and in making this short demonstration, I've typed a few things in ahead that you didn't get to see me type, like the total allocation rates for each floor. Okay, using the value-based, it comes right from what we've solved previously, and the usage base comes from that cell. So the total, let's just add those. It's 933 for the first floor, 668 for the second. And now let's apply it to Diaz and Wright's departments. We need to know how many square feet each department has, and then we can apply the rate. Diaz is on the first floor, so he uses a 933 rate. Wright uses a 6.68, so the total cost to be assigned and allocated to the Diaz department is that amount, and the total amount to Wright is that amount. And I will get rid of decimals, and that is the final solution to part 2. Now, on part 3, let's read that. What allocation method would you prefer if you were manager of a second floor department? Okay, well, a second floor manager would prefer the allocation based on the market value, and that's reasonable and a logical approach to allocate occupancy cost. The current method implies that all the square footage is of equal value, but that doesn't seem logical for this type of occupancy. It also means the second floor space would be allocated a larger portion of cost under the current method, but less using an allocation